There have been any number of people in both media and politics who have stepped up in the past week or so to launch absolutely horrible and worsening attacks against Blasey Ford for having accused Brett Kavanaugh of sexually assaulting her several decades ago. But up until this morning, Donald Trump had chosen to mostly sit on the sidelines, which is not really normal for him, especially considering his own dark past in this area of both harassment and assault, and his steadfast support for any man accused of these things, including Rob Porter and all of that. But as of this morning, he is off the sidelines, he's in the game, and here is how he has decided to weigh in on this topic, saying, Judge Brett Kavanaugh is a fine man with an impeccable reputation who is under assault by radical left-wing politicians who don't want to know the answers. They just want to destroy and delay. Facts don't matter. I go through this with them every single day in DC. The interesting thing to remember about that as we proceed to his other tweets is that he says the other side doesn't want to know the facts, so bear that in mind. Second tweet, I have no doubt that if the attack on Dr. Ford was as bad as she says, charges would have been immediately filed with local law enforcement authorities by either her or her loving parents. I ask that she bring those filings forward so that we can learn date, time, and place. Again, he wants to learn date, time, and place. He wants the facts in that second tweet. But now we get to the third where he says, the radical left lawyers want the FBI to get involved now. Why didn't someone call the FBI 36 years ago? Well, that's the interesting thing. You seem to desperately want to know what was going on, and then you attack them for involving the FBI, an organization whose job is to find out what is going on. I think that we would all like to understand a little bit more about what is going on right now, but also what happened 36 years ago. He seems to have a very weird, tenuous approach to that. That's just one part of it though. Of course, the thrust of his main argument is that her not willing to go forward to the police when it happened as a 17-year-old should really make you question whether she knows what happened, is remembering it wrong, maybe is making up the entire thing. There's shades of a conspiracy in some of those tweets. This has been described, of course, as slut shaming, also advancing long, many times debunked myths about how sexual assault survivors choose to function and whether we should believe them based on the way that they act. As RAINN made clear, an organization that deals with sexual violence, in reality, 7 out of every 10 victims don't report to the police. And they go on to explain that while 7 out of 10 don't report, of those who do, very, very few, a far smaller fraction, get any sort of justice. All of these things are contributing factors to people not wanting to come forward. And I would now add to that list the fact that the President of the United States, possibly the single most powerful person in the world, is coming out and attacking a victim of sexual assault.
Well, this is a president who tends to pay people off not to talk about things that he imagines not to have happened. So it could be that the method in which Kavanaugh could have handled something that may have happened in his mind would have been how he would have handled it.
Yeah.
So that's all convoluted. The reality is, as you said in those stats, not and proportionally most victims of any kind of assault don't come through. And they don't come through specifically for the reason that they could be shamed, they might not be heard, they are dealing with it in their own personal way. And in her case, that's what she was doing for all that time. It wasn't like she wasn't potentially stressed, or that she didn't go to therapy, or she didn't have all of the activity around around the past and what happened in her mind and in how she developed her life. But that said, the guy who is the president of the United States, and kudos to him for holding it together for 2 days and not going after her for him. Yeah. But that is just another in the litany of shameful ways in which he misbehaves. Because the reality is, his job is to say just part of what you just went over. I want to know what happened, and we should continue to determine what happened, as well as what Kavanaugh's other questioning might amount to by the committee as he goes through his hearing. This is a guy who could possibly or not be taking over a major seat for a long time, possibly more than 36 years in the Supreme Court. That's all he should be doing.
Yeah. So let's note a couple of things for the record here. The FBI would not have been able to investigate that crime 36 years ago. It would be local law enforcement. Trump doesn't know that. On the other hand, what does Trump know? And on the other hand, he said just the other day that destroying the FBI would be one of his crowning achievements of his administration. So, and you have to know, this is an important fact, that only the president can ask the FBI to do a further background check in this case. And so he's saying, well, I mean, if only we could know these facts, this, to John's point. Well, there is one way to know them, if you ask the FBI to look into it. Yeah. But if you don't, then yes, then the rest of us can do about it. And
yeah, he doesn't want to set a precedent where the FBI is looking into credible claims of sexual assault amongst powerful Republicans.
Because hello.
It's a dangerous.
Right.
Yeah, he doesn't want to dip his toe in that.
Yeah, and we earlier in the week, we're like, he's showing some degree of restraint. That seems amazing. Well, let's see how long it lasts. But we said it. We said, hey, look, man, you got to call it as it is. That's restraint. He didn't attack her, right? And he said, well, we just want the facts. Like, somebody gave him that talking point, but he stuck with it.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a really low bar to give Donald Trump a compliment like, hey, good job. You didn't viciously attack someone who alleged an attempted rape. But of course he couldn't hold it. Of course he couldn't.
Couldn't do it.
So today, blah, why didn't she do it? My, like the part of the tweets that was most despicable, so questioning whether someone actually went through an experience, because they didn't have they didn't come forward when they were 15. She was scared to death, she said, that her parents would find out that she was drinking at that party and that she got herself in trouble. She's 15 years old at the time, etc. So that's all terrible enough. But did you notice the worst part of it? Or her loving parents comment? In other words, it's her parents' fault for not coming forward. They didn't even know about it. He's such a bad guy. He can't help but viciously attack people that are in any way in his way.
I think that comment actually went to her credibility as someone today as well. Even though, yes, he was attacking her parents for not knowing something they didn't know back then, or not doing something they couldn't know about to do back then. But I just think it was also super condescending. I mean, here is Dr. Ford. Here is someone who's actually come quite a long ways in life, right? And to kind of infantilize that in this tweet, I thought was like an additional extra Trumpian dig.
There's small words. I always look at details, because actually I was waiting for this for days. As you said, he's been holding it in. The only thing of the trifecta of she took too long to come forward, where was the police involved, all this stuff happening. The other part of this that he forgot to go with, which maybe it'll happen tomorrow, is, do you see her face? Do you see her body? Why would Judge Kavanaugh want anything to do with this girl? That's the only thing left in Trump's normal toolbox, is to talk about how she looks and why that's not a thing. Lastly, on that tweet, he goes, if this attack was as bad as she says. So that's kind of admitting that there could have been an attack, and it wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
It was just some, as one of the supporters from the Judicial Watch Network, one of those, it was just some rough horseplay. So it was an attack, but it just wasn't that bad. So she's bringing this up, and all he did was just try to get in her pants. Yeah. Oh, that's just all that happened.
Yeah, let me just, my shade of difference on that is he's saying either it wasn't that bad, right? It was just rough horseplay, as the Judicial Crisis Network spokesperson said it, or it was really, or she's making it up, because if it was that bad, obviously you'd go report it to the police, because in his mind, remember, one of the things he was accused of is, while his pregnant wife was upstairs in the middle of an interview, he cornered a reporter, pressed her against the wall, and started fondling her. And you remember from the Access Hollywood tapes, he says, you just grab him by the genitalia. If you're powerful, there's nothing you could do about it. He views that as not bad,
right?
Right? He views like, hey, a stranger in an alleyway, I guess, as that's bad, and obviously you would go to the cops with that. Everything else, you just shut up about. As Dennis Prager said earlier in the week, oh, people grab my mom's breasts all the time. They grab my wife's breasts, and they were empowered enough to say, knock it out.
Yeah. So I want to add just one more development today to this, because I think it needs to be acknowledged, and he's gotten into this, many of the other defenders of Kavanaugh have gotten into this. There is no one whose life story and choices and actions and communication are examined with more of a fine-tooth comb than survivors of sexual assault. And God help you if you are not the perfect victim who acts exactly the way they expect based on mythology they've created. If you don't, report it in the right way, at the right time, all of that. So they've been saying this whole time, she waited a really long time. It was a really long time ago. I just don't buy it. There's no evidence. Okay, well, we are finding out more now that we know about this, and reporters can look into it. about what was happening to her and her social group around that time. So the New York Times talked with an unnamed male friend of hers that said that after the summer of the alleged attack, Ford, then known as Chrissy Blasey, fell off the face of the earth socially. That's a quote. Then says, all I remember, this is the gentleman, all I remember is after my junior year thinking, where is she? She was the sort of person a lot of people paid attention to. She was a leader. She was great. I was like, where did she go? So I don't expect that will actually convince anyone of anything if they already believe that she's a liar. But she is acting and has acted through the course of her life, up to and including her fears about what testifying next week could actually be like. She is acting exactly like the victim of sexual assault. And that behavior can come in many different forms. The idea that we should be picking apart her behavior to say, that's not how I would have acted if I had almost been raped, is utterly absurd, utterly insulting, and also leads to more women not being willing to come forward when they're attacked in similar ways.
On the go? Don't worry, we got you covered. You can still listen to TYT at our new podcast network. Find us on Apple Podcasts, the Google Play Store, or at tyt.com/podcast.